Welcome to Huddle Up with Matias Bueno. Today's guest is host and associate producer from the Parlay, Sarah Saeed. Sarah, I'm glad to chat with you today. I know that you've started to dabble a little bit more in sports in the last year and a half, and I'm sure that things have been super busy with the Parlay, especially with betting becoming more legalized within the province of Ontario in the last few months.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a crazy ride, but I'm so happy to be here.
So I must ask, what got you into working in sports and following it? Because you said that wasn't something that you were always involved in.
Yeah, I have a strange career path. It's kind of funny. I actually graduated from Ryerson back when Ryerson was Ryerson, not TMU, obviously. And it was for fashion communications, which is a program that is centered around the fashion industry. You could be literally anything that's not a designer, meaning you could be like a graphic designer, an editor, a stylist, a marketing, like a buyer, anything within the fashion world that's not actually making the clothes. So I decided to do the journalism side of fashion. And it was awesome. I worked with fashion editors. I did freelance. I interned in a bunch of places. It was great. But then I decided to travel for like 8 months or so with a friend of mine. We went to Europe. We did, that whole kind of like travel before you settle down type of thing. And it was a great time. And then when I came back, I realized I kind of wanted to do more serious, quote unquote, even though fashion was incredible experience, but I still wanted to kind of dive deeper with the journalism stuff. So I tried to apply to just a bunch of things. And the job that I got was to work as an assistant editor for Veterinary Magazine, which is kind of funny because like veterinary science, I didn't know anything about it, but I learned so much there because like it was like more serious news, and just the format was different of everything. So that was great. Ooh, sorry, I think there was like a bang behind me. But yeah, and then from there, like I kind of delved more into the social media stuff and all these different things. And right before COVID hit, maybe like 6 months or so, I realized I actually wanted to do news as opposed to just like veterinary news. So I was like, what do I do? How do I get into this? I also applied to jobs, but the thing is like, because even though a lot of my skills applied to news, they didn't like actually, like I didn't have the news, journalism thing on my resume officially.
Yeah.
So I guess it was kind of harder in a sense for people to, they didn't want to hire me basically because of that. So I was like, what do I do? I have to go back to school was my thought process. And so then I looked for different programs that I really liked. And I found one that was like a summer program at Seneca. So it was like made for people like me who are doing like a fast track type of course, who want to do a fast track type of course so that they can jump there right into the industry. So I applied for that and everything. Yay, I was so happy. And then time passes on. I'm about to start that program in a few months. COVID hits and I was like, what do I do? Because they canceled the program. I was like, what do I do? I was really sad. And I decided to still quit that job that I was working in because I was like, it wasn't making me happy. And it was really far at the time. It was like lots of things. Even though it was a great like environment to be in, I just felt drained because I really couldn't pursue my dream of news. And so then I actually worked in a warehouse for a bit and I was struggling to figure out what to do next. And then I was like, okay, either you wait another year and see what happens with COVID, or you literally just apply to a full program of school, like a 2-year program at Seneca, like the full thing. So I did that. And it was the best decision ever in my life. The weirdest thing is like, I have a crazy story about that. I was driving home from the warehouse and I was debating on if I should start the January session, which would have been like a couple weeks after that. Like it was like, if I started in January, I would have had to like just jump in, or to start in the fall, which would have been months away. So I was like, I'm going to start in the fall. I'm not trying to, I didn't want to overwhelm myself.
Yeah.
But all my friends and family were like, why are you doing this? Start in January. This is what you've wanted all the time. So I'm driving on the highway going home and I see this huge Seneca sign. And I guess it's just like a promotion for their program, but it was like start in January and massive. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. So I signed up. The sign work marketing, it works. And then I signed up, and then from there, like it was awesome. I wanted to do news, but I had a great prof. His name is Scott Hart. He works at TSN, and he like made me kind of fall in love with the sports world because the news at the time, especially, was just it was really heavy at that point with COVID and all kinds of different things. And just for my own mental health, I kind of wanted to try something different. So I went into the sports world and I did not look back. I love it so much. Sorry, that was a little bit of a long-winded story, but there you go.
I don't really think that there's any way that you can ever tell a shortened version of stories like that, because there's so many pieces of information that give context to what has led you to this, especially because, like you said, you haven't been working in sports. And did you even follow it growing up as well, or you were like a complete stranger to it?
I did not follow it. My parents, they're from Lebanon, and they just weren't interested in sports, and they immigrated to Canada like a couple years before I was born. So they also like were new to the country and just didn't have any, like they didn't immerse themselves into the culture in that way. So I didn't watch sports. My friends didn't really care about sports growing up. So the truth is but I always kind of knew that I would like in the back of my mind. I was like, oh, this is cool. But then I didn't have anyone to really teach me, and it just kind of never happened. And then more recently, I was thrown in, and I literally now, like, because I need to catch up with a lot of things that I missed, instead of a person who's grown up with it, I'm like studying all the time. I'm like studying for a test that's never going to come, because there's a lot to know, but it's so much fun for me. So I'm like, it's all good.
I mean, when you think about, oh man, I know that coming from a background of parents who are in kind of a similar situation. My parents are from Brazil and Portugal, so they did follow sports, but it was more soccer. And so what people love in Canada, hockey, I didn't grow up watching. I didn't follow. And then when you work in sports in Canada, you have to love and follow and thrust yourself in hockey. So I find that those situations can be kind of like grueling because, like you said perfectly, you're studying for a test that's never going to come. But in a way, you're always being tested because you never know when you're going to actually need it. And anytime you go work, you will need to know it. So it is a very, very peculiar situation with having that knowledge.
Oh, 100%. The thing that really I've been blessed with though is like being surrounded by people who are so open and willing to teach me, because I'm the kind of person to ask questions. Like I'm not embarrassed to be like, I don't know this, like I'll ask it. So having people by my side that are willing to sit down and explain things, or tell me this, stories that they grew up with, or just stats and just things that it's like best to learn through a person as opposed to just Googling it. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So yeah, that's been a huge help for me. And like, I'm probably going to keep asking them forever and always.
You focus on the CFL currently and also women's sports in general, or is there a few other leagues that you really hone in on?
So with the parlay, I do women's sports daily. Like, so I do daily picks videos. So it's kind of all over the map. It could be tennis. I did tennis today, WNBA, soccer. I do a lot of soccer. Just really like whatever it is. It could be Olympic sports, anything like that, boxing, which is great because it kind of throws me into different spaces that maybe I didn't necessarily like know too much about before. But at the same time, like, yeah, it's everything. I'm really open. So it's, yeah. I mean, I don't really know how else to answer that. Sorry.
What have you liked about covering the CFL?
Oh my God, I love the CFL. Okay, so it's so funny because I'm from Toronto, like Mississauga, which is like right next to Toronto, and just the GTA in general, like people are not necessarily immersed into the Argos as much as they would be maybe in the west of Canada. So it's like this funny thing where, like it's like a small community to be a part of in a sense, but at the same time, it's so great that it's such an incredible Canadian like sport that has been with the country for like over 100 years. That's like part of its history. Do you know what I mean? Like there's so many layers to the CFL that is so incredible. And the more and more that I dive deeper, whether it's more the historical side that I look into, or the community aspect, or just trying to get people to watch it and be like, come on guys, it's good and stuff, like you always have a positive experience so far for me. So I really love it. And I really love the fact that it's also very accessible to people. Like I feel like the stories of the players, like there's some from Mississauga, there's some from like where I'm from, there's things people you can relate to directly. And that's probably one of the things I love the most.
If you talk to any person across the league, former players, coaches, they'll all say a lot of those things. And even though the CFL, unfortunately, in the city of Toronto, it doesn't get as much respect or love as it should, it doesn't make any of those things less true. And as someone who's from Winnipeg, growing up with everyone loving the CFL is a very backwards experience to move somewhere where people have the polar opposite of feelings towards it. So I think that it's incredible that you get to study and learn the CFL, and what better place to learn about the league's history than Toronto, who are the team that has the most Grey Cups. And you probably have to work the hardest to really get fans excited and people to be interested, because it's the place that desperately needs CFL, like attention on the CFL the most.
Well, you know what? As a person who wanted to do news before, I find myself often like my news brain kind of lights up and I'm like, what's the story here? You know, whatever happens, whether it's something funny or something more serious, I'm always kind of naturally like trying to figure out what the story is, the behind the scenes of what's going on and the emotions behind it. Whether it's emotions of players or fans or like, you know, what are people feeling right now? Like that kind of thing. So in a way, Toronto's perfect for me because there's a lot of stories that need to be told, whether it's about the players or just like the landscape that we're living in right now, where there's a lot of conversation around what's the future of the Argos happening. So, you know, obviously like sometimes it's a difficult conversation to have for many people, but at the same time, those are the things that are worth digging into and worth exploring and worth figuring out, like, you know, the different perspectives that different fans have or what the solutions could be in the future. So it's really like been great for me because in a way, like I'm almost like throwing myself in a scary world, or like not even a scary world, that's probably the wrong word to use, but like, you know, in a place that is completely unknown, not only for me, but for people in the future when they think of like the future of the Argos and stuff like that. So I kind of love that because for me as a person who likes to dive deeper, it's like, it's almost like I get to solve the mystery, but I'm probably never going to solve it. But you know what I mean? It's like, it's exciting, but also like, you know, there's a lot of emotions attached to it as well. So yeah.
It is a mystery that people have been attempting to solve for the last 20, 30 years. And if you talk to the hardcore fans of the Argos, which there unfortunately aren't many of, they've been asking this question for years. What is the way to fix the Argos? How do you get people interested in this game? And there's a lot of solutions that don't necessarily fix everything overnight, but they at least help. For example, with having double headers on Canada Day, or making sure that the league does a better job of promoting them on social media, or whatever it is. Like, I'm sure that it's not it's not the biggest lost cause in the world, because obviously the team has survived people thinking they're going to leave for 20, 30 years, but it doesn't hide the fact that yes, they get the lowest attendance in the league, or the fact that their fan base isn't really as big outside of games as teams in the West. And because of the fact that the Raptors, Leafs, Jays, and all the other great Toronto sports teams exist.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to just pinpoint like one thing as being the solution 100%. I mean, it's many people have tried, right? But from my perspective, in my opinion, it's like something that I think like any other sports league, any other sport that people are interested in, a lot of times they fall in love with the team when they're young, like when you're little and your dad brings you to the game or your mom plays it on TV or whatever that is, you form that connection. And that's what it's like to be a fan, is to form that connection. It could be when you're older as well too, but it often happens when you're young. And, you know, like you see it with football teams, for example, like there's, you know, people that I work with that are huge Cowboy fans, or, you know, Leafs fans that have been like hoping for a Stanley Cup for like literally forever. So, you know, it's one of those things that bond is so important, I think. And to be able to hopefully form that sort of connection with younger generations, even though it is hard, I think it's possible. I think there's ways around it because, it's football at the end of the day. If you love watching football, I'm sure that you would love to watch the CFL. It's a good time. Just out of just pure, to simplify it, it's fun, So yeah, I mean, there's a million and one strategies. The social media people, especially this season, have been great. Like, I honestly have been really enjoying the social media content across the board of the league, the Argos as well. Super great, super, the behind the scenes. They're funny. They post funny videos and captions and things like that. I think they're doing great. In my perspective, and we had a game on Monday, and it was against the Bombers. This was last night, if people don't know. And that should not have been on a Monday, in my opinion. Like, I don't, the home opener was on a Thursday night. It's kind of just setting the Argos up for a failure in terms of attendance and stuff like that, which is kind of heartbreaking to see. And I'm sure there's reasons why it was scheduled in that way, but like, if the Argos are the team that you really, really want to focus on to grow, then they should be in a prime time or closer to the prime time zones, and like, Friday Night Football. Like, I think that kind of stuff would just naturally bring more attendance, in my opinion, especially on a Friday night. Like, people in Toronto, if you know Toronto, like, people always want to do stuff. Like, they'll go to like Taco Fest and like any kind of random events coming up, they'll go. And so I know that people would go. It's just how do you make it like a consistent thing too, right? So it's a hard question to answer for sure.
Yeah, like the game yesterday, well, as it's being recorded, this is on a Tuesday, July 4th. The Bombers played against the Argos. It was an exciting game, and I took a lot of classmates to the game because in my program in Centennial, I'm the only person out of 25 people that is a big CFL fan. We have one other person in the class who is from Calgary and follows the CFL second most, but I'm the only person that follows it first and foremost. So to take people to the game yesterday, there should have been more. Unfortunately, there weren't because people getting busy, and Monday night is kind of tough, like you said. But the game was amazing. Everyone there who came out had only one person had been to a CFL game before, and it was a Grey Cup. So everyone there had been to an Argos game for the first time, including myself. And it was so fun and it was exciting. It wasn't a blowout, even though at the beginning it seemed like it was going to be like that. There was drama. It went back and forth, and the game had a bizarre ending. So it had everything that you could ask for from a CFL game, but fans are the things, are the people and are the thing that is going to take the team to the next level. So unfortunately, there weren't as many people there yesterday as there should have been, but for any person who's watching on TV, you could see for yourself with your own two eyes that it was a fantastic game to watch.
Oh, 100%. The ending was wild and heartbreaking. But also, like, that's what football, like, that's what makes it fun, like you said. And you know what? Like, there's also that other argument where sometimes, maybe we need a star in this, for the Argos, for it to be like people to watch and tune in more. And maybe that is true. I mean, with Nathan Rourke, like, you can see all the hype around him, and it's incredible for him, especially as a Canadian quarterback. I think that's awesome for Canada. And actually, my boyfriend, who does not follow the CFL, he follows the NFL. And we were hanging out on that night where the BC Lions were playing the Argos, and we were watching the game. This was his first time, I think, ever watching a CFL game. It was just on TV. And we were so, like, I was obviously watching it intensely, but he was enjoying it so much because, one, he missed football, NFL is not happening right now, but also because, like, of Nathan Rourke and just the exciting plays that were going on. Like, it was just such a good energy. And I feel like, I don't necessarily think like a star is like the answer to the Argos or anything like that. I mean, it could be great to have one. And I think we have a lot of incredible players that should be seen as stars or are seen as stars, even now, of course. So it's not even like that, but it's like, I think people really connect to the players. And when you watch a CFL game, like the energy is so fun. And then when you know the player on top of that, or you see some incredible play, like it really, that's what will connect you for sure. And yeah, so I'm glad you brought your friends, because hopefully they will fall in love with the team, or at least one player.
Especially considering that it's the Canadian Football League, when you find those people that are from your communities, it's much more unique than in the NFL, where everyone's $1 million commodity. It's really difficult in comparison to the CFL to tell who's in it for money or who's in it because they're passionate about the game, because you'll never become a generationally wealthy millionaire playing Canadian football. That's just a fact of life. But that also means that people who are involved in their community, or who do things on the side, or who are very engaged with their job, what they do, how they practice, etc., it shows their character a lot more. Now, that's not to discredit NFL players by any means, but if you talk to someone like Milt Stegall or Giroy Simon, or Pinball Clemens, legends of the game, you ask them, if you were paid the same amount of money, but you got the community of the CFL versus the NFL, which would you choose? And they would say the CFL every single time, because they can engage with fans, they can make an impact in their community, and they can feel really like they're a part of it, rather than, well, I'm just some person that people want to coattail off of because I make a lot of money. And that's what part of what makes the league unique. And it doesn't have to be the NFL, and it's not, and they shouldn't try to copycat.
Yeah, 100%. It's its own thing. And that's what makes it so great. And I think, like, you know, there's a unique advantage, right? Like if you're talking about engaging people, like there's a unique advantage that, like you said, like you can have a connection with those players. And that's kind of how I've been feeling too. Like anytime I speak with a player, whether it's for an interview or something like that, like there's always a connection there and a bond. I mean, whether it's they lived around or they're talking about Toronto because they're new here. And it's like, you just feel so excited to be able to not only share the love of the game and just like the whole excitement around the league type of thing that you get when you all watch or participate in the CFL in some way, but also the city. It's like, this is still where we're from. Like this is around, I'm from the GTA, or you're from Winnipeg. So there's like, we don't have many things that we can be like that with. Because even when you have, the NBA or MLB or NHL, like obviously we have that connection to our team still because it is our city, but most of the teams are based in the States. So there's still like a divide, like a feeling of divide to a degree. Whereas because everybody's Canadian, every team is Canadian here, like you can't help but feel this personal emotional connection. Maybe I'm just emotional, I don't know, maybe that's me, but but yeah, no, I mean, I definitely think you're right, it shouldn't be compared to the NFL in those ways because it's a different thing.
What have been some of the most exciting memories that you've made so far with covering the Argos this year?
Oh, wow. I honestly have had so much fun covering the Argos. So because I am newer to the Argos, everything is like a new experience for me. But so like just even going to my first practice was so fun. The music was good, the weather was good. It was just like a great environment. And you can tell that the players were just enjoying themselves. Like obviously they're practicing and training seriously, but they're still having a great time and they're friends and they're joking around. And like, it's just like such a good energy to see for your team or the team that you're supporting and or writing about or whatever that is. And then also like I have gotten to so far I've interviewed 2 players for player profiles, which I'm going to be doing this season, and literally both of them were incredible interviews. Like I really love speaking to Curly Gittens Jr. He is one of the nicest people ever and super relatable. Like I feel like I just have known forever. So that was cool for sure. And Andrew Harris is honestly like probably one of the most like he's like wise. He feels wise, or just the way that he carries himself and speaks about his journey and the challenges he's faced and how he's overcome them in the future. Like he has this mindset of he will never give up and resilience. And it's just so incredible to hear him talk about that. Especially after you see him play like he did yesterday, which was awesome. He just like stood out. He was just like killing it the whole time. Like, it didn't even matter what the Argos were doing in terms of scoring. He was just doing amazing. So that made my heart happy. And that's, yeah, that's probably, those are the highlights. Also just meeting people like you and getting to know like some other people from different teams, or, you know, different people who are covering the sport. It's a great time.
You mentioned someone like Andrew Harris. He transcends Canadian football when you think about his journey. And it's interesting that you bring up meeting people from other CFL communities, because when I grew up in Winnipeg, Andrew Harris was someone who was revered, even though he wasn't on the Bombers. And I always wondered, well, he won, most outstanding Canadian against the Bombers in a Grey Cup. Like, that was devastating. I was so upset when I watched that in high school, because you want to see your team win. And, seeing Andrew Harris have success made a lot of people in Winnipeg be like, you know what, I'll let this pass. It's okay. He's a good kid. And seeing what he's done in the places he's been, that's the stuff that people cheer for. And I think that you can't really look past that, no matter what team they play on. Like you said, whether the Argos were scoring or not, Harris played amazing. In my opinion, he was probably their most outstanding player from yesterday's game against the Bombers. And I also think that he should have gotten the ball for them to try 2-point conversion at the end of the game, because even if the Bombers had 24 defenders on the field, he still would have ran through them to get 3 yards. And even though, as someone who grew up watching the Bombers, when you see something like that, you just can't help but be happy, because you know that the story is greater than the game,
That's exactly it. The story is greater than the game. Like, it doesn't matter what really happens on the field at the end of the day, even though, of course, we do want to win and succeed in that way too. But like, yeah, he's like, kind of like, you can feel how the qualities that he has are kind of perfect for a leader, a great leader, a good leader. Like, he just kind of flows with that strength. I don't know, like, it's hard to describe. He just naturally has this strength and this aura about him that is so dominant, yet like respectful. I don't know, like, it's like that fine line, right? And that's what makes him a good leader, whether it's on the football field or just like in the locker room or in general life, right? Like, and it's great to see that, like, he's so resilient in general in his life, but also like you said, on the field, I definitely think he should have been, like, he was the best player, like, from the Argos by far, in my opinion. Like, every time he had the ball, I couldn't keep my eyes off of him when he was playing. And he just was so positive too. Like, he would literally do anything. And after he'd do like a little dance or something, I was like, I love this for you, because it's a hard position to be in, to play against your former team who were the Grey Cup champions, now being in Toronto, on Toronto soil, and he's in Toronto. So he had the best energy. It was just great to watch.
And someone who's from Winnipeg, no less, that makes the story even crazier. And again, who knows what will happen as the year goes on, because if there's anything that you're going to learn about the CFL as you continue to do research, is that number one, no lead is safe. And number two is that anything can happen over the course of a season. And if you look back at the time that Andrew Harris first won the Grey Cup, the BC Lions started the season in 2011, 0-5, and they went on to finish the season as the second division. I think they were second in the West, and they went into Saskatchewan. They won the West final. They hosted the Grey Cup, and they beat the Bombers. And it was one of the most memorable Grey Cup wins in Lions history. Not just because of the fact that they won at home, but because of the fact that they started so poorly and were able to overcome that adversity after the first quarter of the season and become Grey Cup champions. So if you see in the NFL, like, there's a stat in the NFL, I think it's, of all the teams who have started a year 0-4, like 1 or 2 have made the playoffs ever. That's it. Like, forget winning the Super Bowl. So the CFL, I think that's also what makes it super unique, is that there's a greater amount of parity, and people can always come up out of nowhere and make things change on a dime.
I love that 100%.
Someone like Zach Collaros too, if you've dabbled a bit in his story, as someone who, Collaros was a former Argo, not once, but twice. And he has had one of the most remarkable comeback stories, I think, in the CFL in recent years. Are you familiar with the story of Zach Collaros? So Zach Collaros started in the CFL in 2012. He was originally the third string quarterback on the Toronto Argonauts. So it was Ricky Ray, Trevor Harris, and Zach Collaros. Collaros was on the team in 2012 when they won the Grey Cup. And then the next season, he was traded to Hamilton because they needed a quarterback, and Collaros was obviously not going to start over Ricky Ray. So he goes to Hamilton, and they make it to the Grey Cup in 2013 and then 2014. And he was the backup in 2013 to Henry Burris. And then 2014 was a starter. And then he gets a major injury in 2015 and has to miss most of the year. Then he's on Hamilton until 2017 and then gets traded to the Riders, which then that same year he gets injured on a headshot by Simone Lawrence, his former teammate, and is out for most of the year. The next year, they lose in the playoffs to Winnipeg after he suffers another injury. He gets traded back to Toronto. And then in 2019, at the trade deadline, literally with less than 5 minutes to go, the Bombers traded for Zach Collaros to acquire him from the Argos. He goes on to start 4 games, wins all 4, including the Grey Cup, the West semifinal in Calgary and Saskatchewan, and is named the starting quarterback for Winnipeg going forward. The next year, people say, let's see if he can repeat it. He becomes the most outstanding player in 2021, the Grey Cup most valuable player, and the Bombers win their second Grey Cup in as many seasons. And he goes from having never won the Grey Cup to winning 2 in 2 seasons. So even though he is the rival quarterback from yesterday's game, his story in relation to his time with Toronto is almost equally as crazy as Andrew Harris's, but in a different sense. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And that's just proves too that football and CFL is not just about the game itself. It's about seeing all these people overcome different obstacles and feel things that we've all felt, feel confusion and feel fear and feel and just feeling like you don't exactly know where your path is or where you're going to end up, and then seeing them succeed. It's kind of this amazing thing, right? It's like you're seeing it through the eyes of the game, but we can naturally put that connection onto ourselves and think, oh wow, maybe Zach Collaros didn't feel like he knew what was going on at some points, but look at him now. So it's really great to hear that.
I would like to know, what goals do you have in mind for yourself with how you envision the next few years of your career? Because now that you've gotten into sports and you've hit the ground running, where do you see yourself trying to evolve to next? Or what area of sport do you think you might want to stick around more in? Or are you completely unsure because it's still also new?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely new. And because of that, I'm very open-minded. I love learning in general, but I also love learning about sports. So I'm definitely open to thinking maybe there's a sport out there that really speaks to me that I haven't really dived into yet, which just makes it fun for me. It's kind of a cool thing. But that said, though, right now, I'm so happy. I really, really love covering the CFL. I really love covering football, learning more about football. When NFL season comes around, I'd love to also cover that. I'd love, anything in that realm really appeals to me. In terms of goals, what's funny is if I ever interview people, I ask them the same question or something in the same vein, but their answers, they always kind of get a little flustered, and I kind of am in a way right now too, but it's always because it's our goals change in life. Do you know what I mean? And you're like,
Mhm.
what if I say this and then my goal changes and I don't do that? And that's what they'll tell me. And it's so funny because I understood it, but I understand it a lot right now, where it's just so true. When I'm thinking about when you asked me that question, I'm like, oh, it could go in so many directions, and I really, even if I have a goal that I for sure want right now, realistically in a year from now, that could change. So I try not to be so 100% with saying those things. But that said, the goals that I do strive for are less about career things where it's oh, I want to get a job here, or I want to work with this person or whatever. Obviously those are great things to have and aspire to, but for me personally, it's more about fulfillment in life.
Mhm.
So if I find myself in a position that is technically good on paper, but I'm not fulfilled with it, like, or emotionally connecting to it, or even just like mental health wise feeling good, like all those kinds of aspects really play a big part for me. And life's too short, so my goal is to be in a place where I feel fulfilled and inspired and can watch fun sports. That's all it is. So whatever happens, happens. But I mean, I really do hope that I could keep covering CFL at this point. Like, I really, really enjoy it. And the fans are so fun. CFL fans are like the most excited and the most willing to participate and share. And I really love that, because that's all you ever want when you're covering a sport, right?
Yeah. And again, it is such a difficult question to answer, I think, because goals can change and you don't want to feel like you're psyching yourself out sometimes, I feel like, too, because if you say something that another happens, like, oh, well, does that mean I failed? But again, not even to say that failure is a bad thing necessarily, because you always want to fail forward. And so I'm curious, because I know that with someone like yourself who's not really worked in sports for a long time, figuring out your footing is an interesting concept, because there are so many things you can do. But at the same time, it's not bad always to have an idea of where you want to go, so that you at least can navigate to different places. I mean, there are a lot of sports to cover, but I think starting with the CFL is a really great place to be for now.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I mean, of course, like, we all have goals that are even like yearly goals, monthly, like shorter term goals, longer term, like different. We all kind of do that naturally, just as humans. We figure out what we want to do like next. But the reason I say like I don't try to pinpoint one is because, sometimes when you least expect it, the best things can find you. And that's actually what happened with me in the parlay, 100%. So, I was so lucky to have had the opportunity to join this team. And it came out of nowhere, in a sense. Like, I didn't expect it at all. And so, and also like the fact that sports betting in Ontario, has recently became allowed in many different ways. So I could have never predicted that. Do you know what I mean? Like, if beginning of my Seneca days, first of all, I didn't know if I wanted to sports or not. Second of all, I could have never thought, hey, maybe when I graduate, maybe they'll change sports betting and maybe I'll get a job. Like, that's what I mean by like life just happens. And sometimes you end up in the best spots. So that's why I try not to put too much pressure on myself. But if you want, but a real goal for me would be honestly just to learn more. Cause like, learning, and it's never going to end. Like, I'm going to keep learning, of course. But like, if I'm in any position, whether it's like me right now or I'm 10 years from now, and I'm in like some higher position, whatever, I still want to have that mindset of like, I'm still wanting to learn and grow, because like, the world changes. Like, social media has changed not only sports media, but like news completely, right? So again and again, those are new jobs that people didn't predict 5 years ago or whatever. So it's kind of a cool, exciting time to be in, because as things change and grow so quickly, we can change our minds and we can grow so quickly in this industry too, right? Like podcasting, you're doing a podcast now. That's such a cool thing. And that's, something that we wouldn't have known. Like, you watching the Blue Bombers when you were like 12 growing up, you would have never known that you would do a podcast. It's pretty cool.
I never really thought about that before, to be honest with you. And now that I actually stopped to think about it, that's part of what makes it so fulfilling, but also crazy when you reflect on your journey. And wow, I didn't know that when I was doing X as a kid, that would eventually lead to this. It makes sense when you connect the dots looking back, because hindsight is obviously 2020. But for yourself, not having followed sports growing up and now working in sports, I can only imagine how crazy that is to reflect on.
Yeah, that's why my answer is my answer, because like I said, my career journey has been very different, like, to most people in sports, and also it's been very different to most people in general. I think, like, to jump from different, it's still all media and journalism to a degree, but it's like different industries like that drastically different. But the great thing, though, one thing I will say is like, I don't regret any of it, at all, or like there were moments when I was in at Seneca and I was like, why didn't I just do this program from the start? Like, why didn't I just do news from the start? Why didn't I just do sports from the start? Like, it would have been so much easier for me now if I did it a long time ago. But that's, first of all, not how life works. Unfortunately, we live and we learn, and we fail and we thrive, and all these things. But also, like, I wouldn't probably have gotten here if I didn't do those things, because the skills that I acquired and the confidence and the motivation and all these different things that I built in those years really like helped me now. And even stuff like I went to fashion school, and now like I'm more comfortable with it's easier for me now to navigate some certain forms of media that we do, like whether it's like for like fun writing, for example. This is such a weird, I don't even know what to call it, but like, in fashion we did a lot of like, I guess you could call it fun writing, where you're talking about culture, pop culture, and you're connecting those dots to one item of clothing, or to one designer, or to one event and stuff like that. So that's kind of what I do now in a different way too. It's like I'm connecting the dots of culture and the bigger things into like a fun writing experience, fun piece, or Twitter, or whatever it is. And that is like the same thing, but just one was fashion and one was sports. So I mean, we should probably I should patent fun writing. I don't think anybody's gonna use it. But I mean, like, you get what I'm saying, right?
Yeah. I would think of the term creative writing, or writing with flair, as we've been taught in school, just trying to pair things as much as you possibly can. And I mean, everything, I really resonate with what you're saying, because everything happens for a reason. And when you reflect about, well, I could have done this from the start, versus people who actually do start right from the beginning, you can't really compare it, because the life experience you went through that led you to this is different than the life experience that is going to lead someone from starting right at the beginning at TMU or Seneca or whatever it is to where they're going to get to. And it's always apples and oranges. If you have been in sports for a year and a half and someone else has been following sports for 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, you can't make up that lost time. No matter how hard you study, if you have the greatest memory in the world, and that's okay. And realizing that and using that to your advantage, I think, and all the other life experiences you have will only make what you do more unique to yourself, and will give you an advantage over other people who maybe aren't as well versed in a certain area. Like, for example, people always say, well, if you know niche sports, it'll help you. You're following the CFL, and there's not enough women who follow the CFL, in my opinion. I wish there was more, but you're following it. And so that gives you a unique advantage that not a lot of other people have. So rather than trying to bang down the door covering the Leafs or covering the Jays or the Raptors, who now everyone have jumped on the bandwagon for many years, you are in an area that will help you shine, rather than just focusing on beating a dead horse that is not going to come back to life, because there's way too many people that are already there.
Yeah, I mean, it really feels for me like the perfect spot to be at right now. Not only because, I'm newer to the sports world, and it's kind of like a step in the right direction in terms of like Canadian, learning the ins and outs of Canadian sports, specifically in Canadian media, in connection to Canadian sports. But it's also like, I'm very lucky and blessed that I get to work with people at the Parlay who are so excited about the CFL, that help me to come up with content and fun things, and just kind of want me to go for that, and that also gives me a huge advantage, because having a team to back you up is really helpful, of course, but also like, there's more access too. Like, I get to speak with players, I get to come join the practices, I get to talk to other media people. Things like that really, really help to almost speed up the process for me when it comes to learning, because I do have other media experience, which definitely helps for sure. But even though I'm throwing myself in, it's really like an environment that is so welcoming and so like I said, accessible, where I can really just like kind of make my own path and make my own way in a way that's very unique. And I'm very, very blessed, and I'm so happy. And I really, really like, I have had such great connections with people through this. And that's, like I said before, like that's what matters to me, right? It's feeling like that fulfillment and that emotional connection is really, really important. And that's the thing with sports. Like, it's funny because like we focus so much on the stats sometimes and all those things and the plays, and those are like the bread and butter. Like, obviously that's what sports are. Like, it's so fun to watch and learn about 100% too. But then there's this the fans and the players and the staff and the reporters, and literally these layers of different kinds of people who give their heart to it, are really, like, in my opinion, like that's what makes sports what it is. So yeah, the CFL is great. I love it. I have no regrets, and I'm so happy that I ended up here.
How did you land with the parlay?
So through Twitter, actually, which is a hilarious thing. Like, you would never think that, right? So I was just posting on Twitter, and somebody there reached out to me, and we just met, and it was a great fit. Like, that's what I'm saying, right? Life just comes at you. So just take the opportunities, and I did, and I'm really, really happy because the people that I've met at my job are probably the best people in the world. Like, they're so incredibly nice, they're funny, they're supportive, they're helpful, and like we all just like lift each other up. And there's a lot of women too, which I think is such a nice thing to see in sports media.
100%. It's always great to feel supported and to have people around you who are going to help lift you up, because as much as your individual talent and ability matters, having people who can help you is equally as important, and sometimes if not more important.
Oh yeah, 100% more important, I would say, because like I said, like, you can work anywhere, and if you're not feeling like the environment is a safe place for you or comfortable for you in those ways, it's not gonna be great to wake up every day to go to.
So Sarah, we are getting towards the end of our time on today's episode. So I wanted to ask you a few wrap-up questions to have a little bit more fun before we part for today.
Sounds great.
3 favorite places you've traveled to.
Ooh, I love Dublin, Madrid, and Disney World.
3 best types of ethnic cuisine, or places that have, like, which places have the best food?
Oh, okay. Well, I would definitely have to say Lebanese food because I'm Lebanese. But also I love Chinese food. Like, Shanghai noodles are incredible. And then last but not least, Italian food.
What are the best of the, oh yeah, no worries.
I'm so sorry. I just started.
No, it's all good. It's all good. Yeah, it's all good. It's all good.
All
No
right.
worries. No worries.
Go ahead.
3 favorite things to do outside of work.
Oh, I love history so much. So documentaries, watching documentaries, just hanging out with friends. I think, like, I like to do fun new things. I would say that's the second one. And then the third one would be anything like food related. I know we just talked about food, but like, seriously, anything food related.
If you were to travel to any city in Canada that's not major, where would you go and why? As in, like, the major ones being Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver.
That's a very, very good question. Probably, I mean, I don't know if this is a bad answer because you're from there, but maybe Winnipeg.
And why is that?
I mean, a lot of people from Winnipeg seem to be very passionate about their city and have this great energy. So I would love to just go visit Winnipeg and see what it's all about and meet people there. It'd be a great time.
Final question. If you had the opportunity to interview any athlete who's still active, who would you interview and why?
Ja Morant. Because he's just such an incredible athlete to watch play basketball, and his personality is so like unique, and just he's kind of like the future of, I think, a lot of the ways that athletes will be, whether it's on social media, on in interviews, or in the actual sports themselves. Like, he's the future generation. He is so himself, and it just feel like he'd be such a fun time to talk to.
With that, Sarah, I want to thank you for having been on today's episode. It was great to chat with you about the CFL, learning about sports, and I really appreciate the perspective that you have, being able to dive into pro sports way later on in life, but be able to have the opportunity to learn about what makes it so great.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you for enjoying today's episode with the Parlay host, Sarah Saeed.